The duration of our speaker. Now help me enthusiastically welcome tonight's speaker, Criss.
Set my drink down here.
Grab you.
That's super. Ooh. My voice usually carries. Everybody hear me okay? Yeah. I'm Criss, and I am a real alcoholic. Oh my God, am I ever. But I'm not sure I started out that way. You know, I'm an Arizona girl. I had been born on the side of the road by an alcoholic, drug-addicted mother who survived my birth by about 3 weeks. And within that period of time, they found some people that were kind of related to me that were willing to take me on. You know, they asked my mother's mother first, and she lived up in a little place called Cayente, about 20 miles south of Monument Valley, and Grandma said she had too much on her plate, and no thank you. You know, and so this nice couple by the name of Smith. I've actually got, don't laugh, I got Smiths on both sides of the family. One was because when Dad entered the American Navy in 1938, he wrote down Smith. And the other side is a shortened form of Silversmith as a surname. And so, yeah, I'm a Smith. And I used to get teachers, you know, that they'd ask me, they'd say, "What's your name, honey?" And I'd say, "Criss Smith." And they go, "Now really, what is your real name?" You know, and it's like, no, that's it. That's still to this day my full legal name. Dad named me Criss. Yeah, he told Mom he wanted something short and strong they couldn't make a nickname out of. And I've always kind of liked my name. You know, it was one of the things I was really kind of tickled with growing up. But there were some things that I really wasn't either. Somewhere around age 3, sitting in Mom's lap in the rocking chair, she explained to me what being adopted was. And the fact that she wasn't my real mom. She didn't give birth to me, but she loved me all the same. If anything, she loved me more. So I tried to wrap my little head around that, but that one kind of plagued me off and on for a while. And then about 3 years after that, Dad decided, well, it's not good for a child to be totally by themselves, so I think we'll adopt another kid. You know, so, let's do a boy. Why not a boy? So I was 6 and he was 4, and we barely tolerated each other for our whole entire lives. It was everything he could do to get Criss, the eldest, into trouble. You know, and I got to hear things like, you know, well, you're the oldest, you should know better. You know, or you should be looking after him because you're the oldest. Or, oh no, he couldn't have done that. You know, things like I had a wonderful little steering column, like a fake little front of a car. God, I love that thing. It had lights, it had a little turn signal that you flipped and went off and on, and lights that went off and on. And it took him about 3 days to destroy that. When I was about 10 years old, you know, I was horse crazy as a kid. Yeah, Arizona girl, loved my horses. And I wanted this pair of rough-out cowboy boots. Oh, God, did I want that pair of boots. I wanted to wear boots like I saw all the adults wearing boots, and anyone who was horse people had a pair of rough-outs now. And so I couldn't wait. And lo and behold, it was my birthday, and I got me a pair of boots. It took him about 2 hours during a flood to get in those boots and tromp around in them and ruin them. We just didn't like each other, you know? And everybody would go, you know, oh, that's your brother, oh, that's your sister. And we're like, yeah, okay, whatever you say. And we were as far apart as anything, to the point of almost despising each other. So things kind of went on, and I got kind of used to the idea that what I thought about anything or what I said about anything, like Dad's choice in children, I got told real quick that, nope, now you shut your mouth now, and this is what we're doing. And what that did for me was I didn't matter. I don't matter. I come home from school one day and my buddy, my sister, my four-legged dog named Frida, I couldn't find her. And I remember running to Mom, and it's like, where's Frida? Where's Frida? Because that was my sibling, really. And then, well, you wait till your dad gets home, and I'm like, what the heck? What's going on? Where's Frida? And when Dad got home, he sat me down and explained how Frida had an illness and she wasn't coming back. Well, why didn't you tell me? Well, now, and I learned real early that Dad he wasn't the touchy-feely kind of guy. I mean, thank goodness he never laid a hand on me but once inside a police station when I was a little brash, and he popped my nose for me in front of about 6 cops. And they didn't arrest him, though. That's probably a good thing. But I just learned that, I just don't matter. When I tried to tell him, I don't like him. I don't think we should keep him. Oh, no. And you didn't disagree. And one time we were visiting family out of state, and he fell off the pier into the water. And I can vividly remember thinking, what a good idea that is. Now I could swim like a fish. Did Criss jump in and help the adopted out of the water? Oh, absolutely not. I'm standing there. I've got this whole scenario running thinking, this is perfect. It will be just me again. And Mom and Dad, she's of course screaming. All these adults are running down the pier. And I can never forget when Dad grabbed me like this and said, why didn't you help him? I had no answer for that. My answer would shock you. It would not be the answer that you'd want to hear. And besides, I don't matter. Time went on. I finally got some really decent attention, though. I got decent attention in school. For whatever reason, and I find this true of a lot of alcoholics, drinking or not, we have a brain. I don't think I would have survived my active alcoholism if I didn't have a brain. I would have been dead a long time ago. But, God had gifted me not only with a brain, but with eidetic memory. Yeah, this kid had photographic memory. I could read something on a printed page and give it right back to you. And so I whizzed through school. And that was the attention that I had longed for. I didn't get along with the other kids because, of course, I'm teacher's pet, and they all thought I was too good. And if they only knew, I thought I was crap. And I was just, excited that, I did really well in school because it's the one time, my father would give me any attention. Oh, I see you got straight A's again. Good kid, and off he'd go to his study. Dad taught at Arizona State University. It's kind of funny. He went through 13 years of being in the Navy and got the teaching bug, and so he decided he was going to teach. Somewhere along the line, he forgot he had a couple of students at home, and he became very obsessed with the ones over there, and thankfully Mom was home most of the time, and, my mother loved me. She loved me unconditionally. That was what saved my life. And so I started running away because, I don't matter. And doing all those things that we did. And of course, back in my day, it was Tempe. We still had dirt roads. At grade school, I could ride my horse to school and tie her to the fence. Nobody cared as long as I shoveled up after if need be. You know, and I had a fun time out there away from all of you that treated me like I didn't matter. And so I was off and the horse, and oh my God, Mill Avenue in Tempe in the 60s, I want you to know, it was like Woodstock on steroids. I mean, it was lights and music and the underground movie theater. You know, the diner opened, this guy was in there cooking at 3 a.m. and you could grab a stool at 5 a.m. to get your coffee or whatever food you wanted if you could afford to eat. You know, and the midnight flicks. I watched Fritz the Cat at those midnight flicks. I still can't believe at that time it was X-rated. I couldn't figure out why would they X-rate an animated film. Had kiddies doing it, you know. Yeah. So, Mill Avenue, that became, I guess today, what they would call my hood. Yeah. You know, and I hung out at the Q and Brew, the pool hall downtown. Yeah, I like the Q and Brew. I just thought that was fascinating, watching these guys shoot pool. And one night this old man came in and he was watching me watch you, you know, and he says, "Come here." I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "You want to learn how to shoot pool?" I said, "I really would." He said, "Uh-huh." He says, "That bank across the street," he says, "I'm the janitor for that bank. I get off at midnight. You meet me here at midnight and I'll teach you." And so, of course, the next night I snuck out and I was down there. "I'm ready." He says, "Now there's just one rule." I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "The day I hear you hustling pool for money, we're done." "Okay, sir." And he would set up a shot and set up the same shot and set up this same shot. And when I could make that shot 10 out of 10 times, he'd teach me another shot. And I mattered. I got to be quite a shot. So, unlike a lot of female alcoholics of my day, you know, it wasn't that I was running from bar to bar to bar. You know, I was, 120 pounds dripping wet, muscles, and on horses. I mean, come on, people. I kind of had a little bit of a look back then, you know, and so I didn't have any trouble getting guys on Wednesday night to buy me 10-cent shot tequila at Perry's Bar. You know, that was just a thing. You know, you had to be there for 10-cent tequila night, you know. But what was also there in Perry's Bar and the Cave and the Casa Loma and the Asylum Bar, all on Old Mill Avenue, were pool tables. And so while I was shooting pool, I was drinking Coca-Cola or Orange Crush, and I was shooting pool. And yeah, the day the old man found out I took $1, he never talked to me again. But I had a way to support my drinking. And I didn't have to go out and do a lot of those things that a lot of us have to go do to support our drinking. You know, so later on I started doing a lot of bartending and a lot of pool shooting, and I kind of made my way through the 60s and most of the 70s. And at one point, you know, I had some real rough years in the 70s, and it came down to where I had emergency major surgery, and I mean surgery. Yeah. There was a little episode, and so they ended up, you know, putting me into the hospital and cutting me stem to stern. You know, because I was bleeding so bad, and they didn't know what the heck was going on in there, so it was just, you know, get her in before she bleeds to death, and let's just, you know, fix it all up. You know, and so that was surgery number 1. About the time I was recuperating from that, another little episode took place in a wonderful little Mexican mining town known as Superior. And after the event of that little episode, I became pregnant. And it was the one and only child out of 3 that I carried to term during my drinking years. And I gave birth to a little boy that barely weighed 5 pounds because, guys, come on, I'm smoking, I'm drinking. Not a good recipe for a big, healthy baby, and he looked just like me. He was the cutest little thing. He was just covered with black hair, and oh my gosh. And so what do? You're out there and you're living in an abandoned hotel in Globe, Miami there in a little place called Claypool, and there's this big abandoned hotel, but you find a room where the electric still works, you can put a light on, and the stove works. So, well, you squat. I mean, heck yeah. So there's me and my pregnant self and my drinking buddy. So, of course, you get the great idea. We have such good thinking as alcoholics. We do. We're really blessed with a brain. So I drug my drinking buddy over to the judge there in Globe, Miami, and we got married. Oh, yeah. Married the drinking buddy. Yep. And we ended up moving in with my mom and dad in Tempe, Arizona. Back down the hill. After I almost died of acute viral pneumonia from camping in that place. 9 months pregnant, and I had convulsions. My fever had gotten so high, it was like 106 or 7 or off the chart, and they had everything pumping into me, and apparently what happened is all of a sudden I started convulsing. I mean, I'm looking like some cartoon mermaid flopping on the shore out of water. I mean, I'm going up and down on this bed. The bed's moving. The nurse comes running in. She actually leaned over and grabbed the other side of the bed all the way over me. And I'm trying to tell her, I'm awake. I'm telling her, I can't stop shaking. And she's like, I know. It's okay. Just calm down. So finally, the convulsions stopped. They figured that what they did is I'd had such a raging time and a bad fever, and that when my temperature came down, it came down, and my body went into shock. Poor little guy, he's still in there. I'm 9 months pregnant. Phew. That didn't probably do him any good either. So we moved down to Tempe to Mom and Dad and little Justin, and are hanging out there. And of course, the folks realize that we like to have a beer every now and then. So we kind of kept it on the down low for them, but here I am. I'm breastfeeding and I'm drinking like a fish. Poor little guy. So anyway, we finally move out from the parents, get our own little spot. And that's when things got really bad. And I'm talking blackout bad. I'm talking so bad that when I realized what my mother was standing there telling me in my own house, and I had just come out of a blackout, and I don't know what the heck is going on. I don't know about any of you, but if you ever had any blackout drinking, yeah, it almost can be kind of a game, kind of fun. If you're sitting there on a bar stool when you come to and somebody's sitting there talking to you, you just kind of go along for a minute and try and pick up the conversation. It's like, okay, how many hours, days, or minutes have I been gone? God forbid I'm going to suddenly look at you and tell you the truth. Oh, I just came out of a blackout, thank you, and, who are you? Yeah. So Mom explained some things that had happened that shocked even me. The next day, this one little gal I had met in our little park, I'd only seen her one other time. And Steve was gone to work, the baby was with Mom, and she came by, and I told her some truthful things, and she said, let's get out the phone book. Maybe you need to go talk to somebody. Okay. God's little Eskimos. Alrighty, so we get out the phone book, and the one thing that we find where they actually answered the phone was the national Association for Alcoholism. I forget what the heck they call it. But anyway, it had to do with keeping statistics on people like us. And I called them, and the guy answered the phone, and he said, well, come talk to me. And I said, okie dokie. And of course, I went, and I sat down across the desk from Fred, this half-breed Crow Indian out of Montana. Fred was so cool. You know, and at some point with all my blathering, of course, you know what I was saying. I'm blaming him, I'm blaming them, I'm blaming it. You know, why does it always happen to me? I swear to God I'm cursed. Nah, 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 nah. You know, I'm just spewing the typical garbage all us newbies spew. And he said, you know, I think you're right. I got just the place for you. I said, you do? He says, yeah, I know how you feel. And he sent me to Faith House. Now, Via de Fidelis is this wonderful house for Al-Anon. And so I went to Via de Fidelis, and I told him all about him and his drinking and how horrible my life had become. And I had a child, and okay, they let me stay. And I stayed there for about 3 weeks. During that period of time, on a Thursday afternoon, this wonderful man named Jim, he worked for the post office. Yeah. He came by and he says, hey, this time we're going to load in the van. He says, I'm taking whoever wants to go to an open AA meeting. Who wants to go? Now. Of course, he tracked me down and said, Criss, you want to go, don't you? Don't you want to go to an open 8 meeting? I said, what would I need to do at an open 8? He says, well, you might learn something to help those drunks in your life. Oh, okay. Well, we like helping. You know, so off I went to my one and only meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was at 21 West Dunlap in Phoenix, Arizona, in a brick building. It was the original Saguaro Wilano Club. And it was interesting. The meeting room was L-shaped. Only one I've ever seen like that, and I've been across the country, L-shaped. And what caught my attention, really, when I went in and sat down, thinking, oh, this is interesting, they had a mural done all the way around that L shape. And it was all the promises out of our book. And I remember reading those and thinking, well, that's just kind of cool. And a few of them I knew, yeah, that'll never happen to me. Yeah. So the one thing I heard in that first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous was, you're going to love it. Well, if you think maybe, just maybe, you have a problem with alcohol, there's always one way to find out. And so the next day, I did. I stopped in a little bar that I had only been in that day. Never been in since, just happened to be that little bar. It was there. I stopped in. I remember having a draft beer. It had a pool table. This is all wonderful. I don't know if I had a second one. I don't think so, but I'm not sure. And back to Faith House I go. Well, that Friday night, they used to have these charity bingos in Phoenix. There was a building called CASP. Guess whose night it was to work the bingo? Faith House. Guess who worked half of the Faith House bingo in a blackout? Guess who everyone was ready to kill the following morning? I still have no clue as to what I said or did. I think I stayed clothed, but I don't think I laid hands on anyone. I probably would have ended up in jail. But there wasn't one woman in Faith House that would even come and look at me that following Saturday morning. I remember going to the manager and she said, and I quote, "You're not one of us. You're one of them. And you need to go do whatever it is they do because, honey, you got a problem with alcohol." And I said, okay, can I call Jim? And she says, yeah. So she called Jim, and I said, Jim, this is Criss, and I think I might have a problem with alcohol. He said, wonderful, go to Casa de Amigas. Click. What's Casa de Amigas? So we finally, after making a few Casa phone calls to the wrong place, one was a rape center, one, we find this place, Casa de Amigas, and this woman answers the phone and talks to me, and I said, well, here's kind of what's going on, and, I think I might have a problem drinking. And she said, and when was your last drink? And I said, yesterday. And she said, fine, we'll see you Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. and try not to drink between now and then. Oh, shit. So I just hung in my room. I came out for meals and then went back to my room. Came out for a meal and went back to my room. On the Tuesday morning, I actually had a car. I loaded everything that I owned in the world, aside from the kid. He was already being taken care of. And I put it in one large brown shopping bag, threw it in the trunk of the car, and by 7 a.m., I was flying down the freeway looking for Casa de Amigas. And I found it at 303 West Portland, right a stone's throw from the Deuce. And it's this wonderful two-story built in 1904 arts and crafts house. And I'm sitting there at 7, and our committee, the little angel guy and the little devil guy, that little, the two voices, started talking at me. Oh, well, you're not that bad, and oh, well, this was just this time, and and I got so scared, I got out of the car and went and sat on the step. I just didn't know what the hell to do. And I don't know how long I've been sitting there. The door opened, and this little bitty white lady comes out with these little bitty glasses. I even have some now, little bitty glasses, and she says, hi. And I said, hi. She says, who are you? And I said, I'm Criss, and I'm your 10 o'clock appointment, and if you'll just let me sit here, because if you don't, I don't think I'll be here at 10 o'clock. Well, why don't you come in? And I went in, and he put me in a little interview room, little bitty office, and this white cockapoo dog named Flash, he even has his own plaque on the wall, came running in and jumped in my lap. And that kept me there. God's little Eskimos. So I'm petting the hair off of Flash, and I'm pouring out, my alcoholic life story. And they kept me. And out of a 14-bed house, I took the 14th bed. Out of the 14-bed house, I'm the one that's only continuously sober to this day. But sitting there in the morning, listening to the morning meditation, reading that little 24-hour-a-day book, because that's what we had, or Stools and Bottles. Anybody got that one? That's a cool book. And I'd sit there and I'd hear all of this, and every now and then they'd talk about statistics, only 20% of the people that ever come here, and on and on. And I knew I was not going to make it. I was willing to do whatever you told me to do. If you told me to disrobe and stand on top of the roof, I would have been there, baby, like Flash. I stayed there 63 days. My higher power loves me. Because just coincidentally, is it odd or is it God? I stayed there from the 7th of November, my first day of sobriety, 63 days all the way through, yeah, you got it, all the major holidays. I did Thanksgiving dinner and open house at Casa de Amigas. I did Christmas and helped decorate the huge 9-foot-tall tree at Casa de Amigas. We celebrated New Year's at Casa de Amigas. I mean, oh my goodness. Somewhere around my second week there, I had started reading our book. Because whenever I went to Annie, my little mentor in the house, she'd say, well, why don't you go read? I'd say, okay, I'm ready to kill that girl in the next room. Here, go read the book. Yeah. So I'd lay out in the yard, and I started reading the book. And somewhere between the Roman numeral in the middle of chapter 3, the light went on. And I remember running into the house going, Annie, Annie. And she about collided with me. She's like, what? I said, Annie, I'm an alcoholic. So that's great, kid, and started to go on. She's turned and she looked and she says, are you happy? I said, oh, Annie, I'm so happy. She looked at me and she got quiet and she leaned in and she says, and when was the last time you felt like this? And I started crying. I couldn't remember the last time I felt like that. I did 111 days in 90. They say go to meetings, 90 and 90. I did 111. They said, these women that come in a couple nights a week, you might want to get one of them for a sponsor, and so I did. Yeah, and shortly before I was to leave that house, she was having some real issues with health, and she said, I'm going to give you your grand sponsor to my sponsor, Yvonne, and I said, okay. And Yvonne Porter became my sponsor. Let's talk about these women. My sponsor was Yvonne Porter. Her sponsor was Mama Ruth Welch that started 4848 on South Central. Her sponsor was Marge Powers. And the great grand sponsor of all of them was Kitty Harold, who in 1981 had the most sobriety of any member of Alcoholics Anonymous at 41 years in 1981. Boy, is it odd, or is it God? 63 days in the house, I got out. 65 days, I got a job, and I was sitting there talking to this lady, and they had told me, tell the truth. We know you don't really know how to do that real well, but tell the truth. And I'm getting this job interview, and she says, what exactly were these medical reasons for you leaving your last job? And I said, I went into detox, and I went into Casa de Amigas, and I got sober, and I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm an alcoholic, and I've got 65 days. And I was ready for her to say, yes, thank you, we'll call you. And she didn't do that. She said, really, how many days? I said, 65. And she said, well, I don't really have an opening. And I started to get up. She said, but I've been toying with this idea. Would you help me with it? And I said, yes, ma'am, anything. She says, all right, I'll give you a job. She says, by the way, I used to be a drug and alcohol counselor in California before my husband and I retired and bought the pet shops. Is it odd or is it God? So I went through doing all the things, and I did all the crazy stuff we new people in our first year do. You say, don't get into a relationship. I did that. Boy, when Criss does it upright, she really does it upright. And there was this really pretty thing playing the guitar at an Atlanta club one night, and it was like, oh my God, am I infatuated? Well, you should ask them first how much time they have, before you go doing. And I had 10 months. I knew I was solid. Yeah, right, kid. They had 9 days. My sponsor warned me, she says, what happens, why we tell you not to do that, even though it doesn't say that in the book. But the experience, what we've learned is that the focus is taken away from the book in Alcoholics Anonymous and is on you. And you basically become their higher power. And how can they get sober, stay sober off of you? It's not going to happen. So I ended up making amends to that person when I saw him years later. What's happened to me in my sobriety is I've come full full circle. Everybody that disrespected me is either dead or I have their respect today. You know, I have a good job. I had a woman call me up here about 4 years ago here in Prescott, and she says, you know, I've been thinking, we opened this big new place, and you want to maybe come up and work a Monday or something? And I said, sure. Well, I do a lot more than that now. And I ended up moving here from Camp Verde. Camp Verde's my home group. I love little old dusty Camp Verde. I just love them to death. New people all the time. I love new people. Love new people. I was living in Holbrook while I was sober for a while, and I was coming back from Florida. That's a whole nother story. When my mom was dying, she told me she had the big C, and I said, all right, I'm coming. No doubt in my mind. I'm 12 years sober, and I'm coming. I put my house on the market. Within 3 weeks, my house was sold. I had money in the bank. All the stuff had been sold off. I loaded everything into the car, and I was sitting on her doorstep at 504 Oak Street in Clarksville, Arkansas. For the following year, I took care of Nelda like she took care of me. And I had my first sober dog. That was a whole nother Izzadad or God. She was half Northern Timberwolf, black face and white eyes, and her name was Storm Girl. And Storm and I would get up at 5 a.m. and we would go to somewhere near water in Arkansas. There's a lot of water in Arkansas. It's not hard to find. And we'd go somewhere near water. I'd do my 11th step, and then I'd go take care of Mom. I told her, I said, what do you want to do? She says, I want to go in my own bed. And I said, that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to do. About midnight, the night she left, we were having a conversation. And the last thing my mother said to me, I've got my Criss back. My Criss has come back. Now, you and I know, at 24, getting sober, I knew I wasn't going to see 30, and 25 was kind of a coin toss. So I took care of Mom, and I took care of me, and I took care of the dog, and in the midst of all of that, my sister and I met as adults. She lives in Florida now. We didn't even know each other existed up until then, and I want to tell you, I got really enmeshed in the Creek side of the family. For any of you Indians out there, I am Tall House or Tower Rock Clan Navajo, and I'm also Yuktali Clan, Great Serpent Clan, Muskogee Creek. And so I went and spent some years out there in Florida with my Creek people. And I became the Snake Clan mother. I became a traditional storyteller and singer. We did a lot of powwow. We were invited to all the museum shows. We did everything at Seminole and Etowah Mounds and just all over the place. And I never thought the first time I did it that I would have stood up there, told stories, and sang to about 10,000 people. Girl I knew before AA didn't matter and wouldn't have done that. So anyway, if you ever want to come and say hi, I'm at 209 West Gurley. I'm in a wonderful little gallery called Prescott Patina. We like having little impromptu meetings in there. You know, and every now and then I go have lunch at the Salvation Army. Not because I can't afford to make a sandwich, but I just kind of like to listen, you know? And I'm not adverse to helping anyone at any time, anywhere. Yes, Criss will go on a 12-step call by herself. You know, my book tells me, I'm thinking about the COVID. Kathy and I were talking about that a little bit ago, and my home group had decided, well, half of them had decided they were going to mask and they were going to shut down the meeting and go Zoom. And I said, not this girl. And there were 3 of us old timers, and we said, well, even if it's just us 3, we're keeping the door open. Haven't you heard? The governor said, if it was, how did they word it? If you were a needed service, you could stay open. And I said, yeah, baby, that's what we're going to do, by golly. And there's a lot of people stayed sober through all of that because the door was open, me included. So anywhere, anytime, any place. When I was living in Holbrook, I did talk and circle for the jail, and I took AA meetings in there, because that's just what you do. You get approached and people go, well, will you do this? At one point, the sheriff manning that jail there, Navajo County, he came, and I'd been doing talk and circle and meetings for the women for a couple of years, and he says, you feel funny about maybe working with men? And I said, absolutely not. I said, you want to do talk and circle for your men in there? I'm sure you got a lot of native in there. And he said, I think that would be a good thing. And my first talk and circle I had for men, there were 12 people showed up. I want you to know that's a crowd in jail now, especially when you're not giving away food, okay? And I even did one-on-one counseling. And, it's just, I think of, got to get a sponsor. And a sponsor isn't a boss. A sponsor is somebody that's going to go through those steps with you and read the book with you. Okay? That's what mine did. I was taught that the first 30 days of, I had a prospect for the program, because it doesn't say pigeon or baby in the book. I'm sorry, people. It says a prospect for the program. And if I have a prospect for the program, then I take them to a meeting every night for 30 days. That's what I was taught. Yeah, and if there isn't a meeting every 30 days, then you get in the book that day. And you show them how to do this. My good friends, Joe McQueen and Charlie Parker, I met them years ago when they started doing this thing called Big Book Comes Alive and putting it on tape and going around and speaking. And I was down around cells visiting the old maker of medicine, Joseph Andrews, who we never would have met if Criss had been drinking. And I went over to see the little Franciscan chapel and shrine, absolutely wonderful DeGrazia paintings. And I was talking to the Franciscan brother, Brother Dermot, and he says, hey, there's these guys coming in a couple of weeks to talk to whoever right here. I'm putting the word out. And I said, yeah? Who is it? And he told me, and I said, oh, yeah, I want to come. And I took 2 people with me. I took my little Eskimo friend, Ella Legg, and I took this other little guy, David, who was having trouble finding sponsorship. He told me 4 years later, he says, when you took me down there and we slept in the yard and we went and did that thing with Joe and Charlie, I said, yeah. He says, I've been sober ever since. Is it odd or is it God? Ella and I got in a horrific car wreck in 1987. Yeah, it was spectacular. Yeah, the type of wreck, the ego of an alcoholic really likes. I mean, it took them 2.5 hours to get me out of the car. I lost that photographic memory. I couldn't walk, and that was the 3rd time I'd been wheelchaired. My right eye didn't work. It came back about 6 months later, thankfully. The marriage that I had at that time went to crap. That was done by 92. We don't know how to date in Alcoholics Anonymous. We really don't. We know how to lust. We know how to get infatuated. We don't know how to date. I mean, it's like, oh my God, second date, where's the judge? I mean, we don't know how to do that. And the only thing that kept me sane after all of that was the dog and motorcycles. My only other claim to fame, I'm not sure if it's a good one. But it helped. I was a founding member of the 5th Chapter Motorcycle Club in Phoenix, and I became a founding member of the 5th Chapter Motorcycle Club in San Diego. Yeehaw. So, there's a place here for everyone, and everything has its place. My sponsor, Yvonne, used to say, coincidence is just where God chose to remain anonymous. Thanks for inviting me.